Does everything make sense? Would you like me to go over it one more time? I asked, trying to be patient yet firm. Look, outside of that door are the changing rooms. As soon as you set foot on the floor, you're responsible for what goes on in the store. Got it, Jerry answered, wiping the melted chocolate from his Milky Way onto his shirt and placing the half-consumed bar on a table. I only get to play with the store-wide intercom if there's an extremely important announcement, and Myron needs to eat every hour because of his medical condition. Every half hour, I corrected, handing him a wet wipe. That's the most important rule, Jerry. It's an extremely important health issue, and as his co-worker, I'm expecting you to keep an eye on Myron. He nodded without looking at me before turning and heading out of the break room, throwing on his blue Walmart vest. I watched as he walked placidly into his first shift, praying that he wouldn't fuck up. Jerry fucked up. Myron needed regular sugary snacks to keep his levels under control and was scheduled to eat again at 8:45 p.m. It was his last feeding before we closed, and a voice in the back of my mind told me to make a quick check of the security cameras to see how things were going. Oh shit. Myron was standing completely still next to a checkout counter near the exit. Even through the low-grade cameras, I could tell that something was very wrong. His skin looked pale, nearly blue. I jumped out of my chair, ready to race across the store. But as my feet hit the floor, I saw that it was too late. Myron lunged at a man as he walked by. I spun around and pressed the button for a store-wide intercom, took a steadying breath, and put on my best manager voice. Attention shoppers, I announced please move to the back of the store immediately. I knew that things might be okay if everyone did exactly as I said. No one moved. Please move to the back of the store immediately, I repeated, trying to stave off the panic. This is not a drill. Myron had pinned the man beneath him. His victim was not moving. But my announcement had distracted nearly everyone nearby, so he hadn't yet initiated a panic. I noticed that Jerry was not nearby. I pressed the button to auto-lock every door in the building. No matter how bad this dumpster fire got, I wasn't going to let him out into the world. That way, I could at least say I'd prevented a city-wide catastrophe. Do not stay out in the open. I repeat, do not stay out in the open, I said for a third time, praying that they would listen. There was a pause. Then panic rippled through the crowd, moving them in ways that my pleas could not. I breathed a sigh of relief. My breath stopped when I saw a group moving toward the exit, right where Myron was feeding. I snapped back to the microphone, my hands shaking. Stay away from windows and doors, I ordered, and do not attempt to exit the store. Myron looked up. His mouth was covered in blood, and his face looked more mannequin than human. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The group stopped and stared at him. Fuck. This was bad. I was going to have to make a lot of evidence disappear. That includes security cameras. Please move to a spot that is not visible to any cameras, I added. The hyperventilation was pushing me to the edge, but I knew I couldn't pass out. Not again. I weighed running to the front of the store and confronting Myron. But what good would that do? In his state, he would only overpower and consume me. No, I had to focus on keeping any more potential victims out of sight. And, for the most part, they were. Nearly everyone had hidden themselves. If all went well, we could just ride out the rest of this shitshow until Myron returned to normal. Then he stopped eating, raised his now inhuman face, and sniffed through the thin, flat slits that were his nostrils. I scanned the 19 security cameras and found them on the 13th one. Oh no, a woman had opened a bag of chocolates and was feeding it to her kid. He'd stuffed 5 Milky Ways into his mouth at once. Myron could smell children digesting sugar from a quarter-mile away. Keep away from aisles with food, I announced. If you have food with you, leave it and move to a new hiding place. My mind raced to think of anything else these people might be doing to inadvertently provoke a monster. If you have any open wounds, cover them with clothing. I held my breath. Then Myron swallowed a mouthful of biceps and turned his head, very curious about what he had sniffed. Well, this is it, I thought. We're all going to die. I reached under the desk and unscrewed the cap of my Kirkland signature moonshine, took a fiery sip, and leaned back into the intercom. Assume a fetal position and place your hands on your head. Close your eyes and do not open them for any reason. I leaned back, wondering who would be the first to die. Then the chocolate kid family stood up and sprinted down the center aisle, which was about as wise as intimidating a lion by smacking it with raw wildebeest steaks. Myron's head turned slowly as he watched them careen into the locked exit. The husband body slammed the door, finding out the hard way that the door was much stronger than him. Since this camera was the only one with audio, I got to hear every painful collision. Slowly, Myron rose. Then something twitched at his feet. Holy shit, the man he was snacking on, who now lacked both arms, both legs, and had only hamburger meat where there had once been a face, was still alive. Myron stared down at him in confusion, forgetting the family at the door as he faced away from them. Then he reached into the man's open torso and grabbed some intestine like it was stuffed sausage. He knelt down into the man so that he could feast without using his hands. Against all odds, the family might now actually be able to escape if they were very, very quiet. "Hey," they screamed at Myron, "let us out." I stopped breathing. "Did you hear me? I don't care if there's a fucking tornado. Unlock the door and let us out." Myron must have found an exceptionally tasty nugget in the colon, because he was chewing abnormally fast. I scrambled for the intercom. "Attention, please do not talk to any Walmart employees." Myron looked up at the sound of my voice. And then, slowly, he began to stand, placing his palms on the conveyor belt and pushing upward. Now the family saw the blood. Now they slowly retreated, now that it was too late. I watched helplessly as this family of 2 parents and 2 little kids ran from Myron while he lumbered after them. If it were just the 2 adults, they might have been able to hold him off, but the children were too small to move fast enough. The more practical part of my mind begged them to ditch just one as a sacrifice. Instead, they moved through the clothing section, making a beeline for the changing rooms. They were headed right for me. The gears in my mind whirred. I knew what I had to do. I opened the door, peeking through. My blood ran cold as I saw the eerie form of Myron in his changed state, looking confusedly around the changing room. "Hey," I whispered. "Hungry, big fella." I held out the half-eaten Milky Way bar that Jerry had left behind. His nostril slits flared. Then he stepped toward me, licking his lips with a 7-inch tongue. I smiled. This was actually working. Then a baby cried from inside a changing room. I sighed. Myron stopped, turned around, and stared at the door. I shook the candy bar, but it didn't do any good. The baby kept crying, and Myron's curiosity had been piqued. He squatted, putting his hands on the floor, lowering himself to the gap at the bottom of the door. Then he pushed his arm under the gap and blindly swept it across the floor, and he lowered his head. "Attention shoppers," the intercom announced. I whipped my head around. Fucking Jerry. "Please make your way to the front of the store and make your final purchases," he announced into the microphone. "We will be closing in 10 minutes. I stared back into the break room, aghast, and then I understood. The bored look on his face told me that he was oblivious to everything that had happened. He just wanted to check out, believing that employees also left at closing time. My blood went from freezing to boiling. Instinct took over then as I found myself barreling toward Myron. I couldn't have anyone else seeing him, so the only hope was that my anger strength was enough. I knelt down and grabbed his ankles, dragging him away from the changing room door as my heart rate surged past 200. He clawed helplessly at the smooth floor, leaving smeared blood marks in his wake. The first people crawled out of their hiding places just as I closed the break room door behind us. With Jerry, Myron, and me locked in the small room, I was overwhelmed with the smell of copper, weed, and body odor. "Hey man, I think that most of the customers are gone, so I'm going to clock out early. Oh God, what the fuck is that thing?" Jerry stammered as he saw me step away from a confused and angry Myron. "That," I huffed, "is a promise I made to my mom just before she died." I wiped the sweat and blood from my face as they stung my eyes. I told her that I would make sure my brother would always have a job, that he would always stay hidden. Of course, Milky Ways are his favorite. They halt his changes, but when he turns, the only thing that brings him back home is meat. He turned around, staring at me in fear. Yeah, it scares the shit out of me too, I answered. But while you were getting high and looking at phone porn, he almost ate a baby. Myron hissed. The sound instantly dried my mouth and throat. Then Myron lunged. Jerry screamed as I shoved him forward, but the sound cut off when he was parted from his trachea. My insides felt like they turned to liquid as I watched Myron chew. God, I hate working retail. Thanks for tuning into our scary story today. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more spooky tales like this one. Until next time, stay safe and keep your lights on at night.